Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Normally, God is perceived and always talked about as if he is above all controversies. People always assume that the perception of God is identical in each and every religion or cult. Nothing can be farther from truth. As a matter of fact, I remember Sir William James, an American philosopher and psychologist. He very eloquently described in his writing that every person born has an innate desire to know something higher. We often call that higher entity God. But the reality is that we have never been able to comprehend or even describe that higher entity intelligently. And that is despite the fact that we thought we devised several beliefs of God, deities, religion. Notwithstanding all that, the conception of God differs. One thing which is amazing is that all religions, Abrahamic, which is Jews, Muslims, Christians, and Hinduism, the largest religion outside the Abrahamic religions, have one thing in common, and that is their identification and perception of God. But Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, the youngest religion in the world, his conception of God was quite different. The first Sikh theologian of the era in which Guru Nanak lived, Bhai Gurdas, the guy who basically wrote Guru Granth Sahib, he has described the innate urge and its ill-conceived human relation vis-a-vis God on in his War 8 पौड़ी 6 लख चौरासी जोन विच मानस जनक दुलभ पाया चार वर्ण चार मजबा हिंदू मुसलमान सदाया. And basically, if I translate it, out of the numerous life forms hard to obtain human being, they invented many divisions, stratification of society and religions, and labeled themselves Hindus and Muslims. And while the concept of Hinduism, as described in Vedas, Shiv Shakti, and in Quran, basically it was much away from what should be. Now in Hinduism, the concept of God is very complex and depends on the particular tradition, what Bhai Das refers to as Shiv Shakti, and depends on this particular tradition. The concept spans conceptions from absolute monism to henotheism, monotheism, polytheism. And if you study the Vedic hymns, you will see the early rituals believed in polytheism, not one god but many gods. The principal Vedic gods, Vishnu, Indra, Rudra, Agni, later on gave place to Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. These three gods from the trinity of Hindu faith when Guru Nanak was born in Punjab. And Nanak discarded the polytheism of Vedic rishis and rejected the hierarchy of gods. And he preached the worship of God in truth and in spirit. Now, if you refer to the naming, Judaism forbids the naming of God. God cannot be given any name. And the most sacred name of God is not articulated. But though it's not articulated, the Christians have translated it as Jehovah. Islam interestingly uses 99 names for God. 99 names. And out of them, Allah is the most important name. Christians name God as Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hindus have numerous gods and goddesses and also a trinity of gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. It is in Sikh religion that you do not find a unique name for God, but they have been very open about it and they have used the names of God as have been used by Hindus and Muslims. They did not hesitate in using Ram, Rahim, Krishna, Gopal, Shiv, as they simultaneously used Allah. Of course, Vaheguru was used, but it was used more by Bhatts for eulogizing Sikh gurus. Now, interestingly, while the first 9 gurus did not give any name, Guru Gobind Singh, the 10th Guru, in his masterpiece, Jap Sahib, defines attributes of God, the absolute reality, in beautiful terms, and thousands of karmic names have been given to God. This is a mystical reverie, basically, Japsa, but a part of the Sikh religion. Now, Guru Nanak's God is conceived as without any form and is designated as Nirankar, that there is no form in that, is formless. And since it's formless, there can be no images, no idols, no figurine can represent God or to be worshipped as God. Now, here you might say that even Islam says so, but then Islam does not say it's without form. It says it cannot be depicted in idols and statues, but nowhere it says that it is formless. Now, Sikhism says that all creation is God's visible form. It can be a human being, it can be an animal, it can be a reptile, it can be a tree. Now, for the first time, basically, the Sikh gurus came to pantheism, an environmental deification of nature. There is a Shab, Pavan Guru, Pani Pita, Mata Tat Mat. That Pavan is wind, is a guru, is a teacher. This earth is a mother. So the whole concept has changed, and the religion was more towards pantheism, as I said, more towards the worship of nature, formless God. Interestingly, that was one aspect. But the Sikh philosophy dialectically unites the idea of God and the world. Possibly Guru Nanak was the first religious leader who linked the spiritual salvation of man with the social salvation in this world. He has nowhere said become an ascetic. He nowhere says that you have to follow this path to achieve salvation. No. God is prior to and distinct from the world. And immanence of God represents God connection with the world. So the Nirgun, without any trait, he becomes Sadguna. So one form of God is that he has no trait, but then he has all the traits combined together. This is something very different, and that's the duality of religion. Now, basically, countless human creations discriminated themselves into men and women, males and females. The word became a fraudulent display of the illusion of Maya, which created Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And Hindus read Vedas and Muslims read Islamic scriptures. So there were two different ways to describe the creator. One creator, two different ways to describe it. But the Muslim way, the Islamic way, is absolutely identical to Judaism and Christianity. Now, out of the play of Shiv Shakti were propagated benefits from yoga, meditation to the body exercises, bhoga, the sensual, sexual enjoyment, and both genuine and pretentious clergy reap the benefit. So, until Guru Nanak came with his new concept, Abrahamic religions and Hinduism describe God as anthropomorphic entity. Now, anthropomorphic entity means the description of God in physical human forms, categories and forms appropriate to the majesty of God. For the first time, Guru Nanak discarded this concept of anthropomorphic form, and till now people have been using and viewing God in this form. And the text of the Vedas, Bible, New Testament, and Holy Quran are a testimony to that. Furthermore, if we go further, study further, this anthropomorphic doctrine came to believe that God once created by humans, in turn made humans in his own moral image. Christ Bible very clearly says God created man in his own image. But before God created man in his own image, psychologically, mentally, human beings had visualized God in the image of man. So, what it basically meant was that God wished humanity to live a life marked by justice, equality, fair dealing, mutual respect, sympathy, love, compassion. Indeed, all the children of Abraham, that's a Semitic, basically consciousness, and Vedic civilization so personified, rationalized the transcendental deity that it became a larger, more powerful, and lethal version of themselves. Now, this trait, what we call basically anthropomorphic trait, was peculiar to all religions, and every religion accepted it because that gave them a sense of identity, a connection. And humanity as a large unit by itself did not hesitate to impart God to its varied individual, communal, or national agendas, practices, likes, dislikes. So they created an absolute out of finite ideas of manhood, nationhood, ethnicity, race, policy, ideology, and return was even theology was infected by it. Now, interestingly, you would see that when you talk of anthropomorphic God, you perceive God as concocted by clergy. It's a creation by the clergy, how they perceive it. What is after all anthropomorphic? It is an attribution of human traits, emotions, and intention to the non-human entities. It is basically an innate tendency of human psychology to impart its trait to something else, deify it, enlarge its scope. And this clergy created God sits far away in the heavens as a majestic human figure. So God has always been seen, visualized as an exalted human being. And then, what was this exalted human being doing? Micromanaging human affairs. Our houses of worship told us that human beings must fear God. Now, if God is merciful, why fear God? Why not love God? And if you don't fear God, if you're not God fearing, and that became a common everyday usage, be God fearing. Because otherwise, He will dish out punishment like pain, disease, calamities. And not only in our life, but even after death, we will live like suffering animals. Further, this God had to be searched and venerated. It was not easily attainable or approachable. It was beyond the approach of common people. This God needed appeasement through clergy intermediaries. And this concept of intermediaries is missing in Sikhism. Guru Nanak said that no, each individual, each human being is fit for veneration. The consequence of this clergy created God, anthropomorphic God, that a variety of religious dogma, belief, and practices were invented. And for example, endlessly repeating names, repeating scriptures, getting part of the possessions of the clergy. And the clergy invented to maintain its hold a variety of religious institutions to their adversaries. Now, 5 centuries back, Nanak began his mission by alerting the people against this clergy made God. All the tradition. He goes to Hatwa, starts throwing water, as not as suggested by the Brahminical era, but then opposed to that. Goes to Mecca, puts his feet against Kaaba, and shows that God doesn't live only in Kaaba. So the whole clergy motivated concepts were demolished. What he did was he preached God as a virtual reality in all creation. God did not create man in his own image. Yes, he did. But he also created dogs and reptiles, cows and buffaloes, goats, snakes, worms, snails, trees, flowers, weeds in his own image as well. So our creation basically is a virtual reality. Thus, the God of Nanak is associated with and realized through a genuine appreciation of natural designs that flourish within us and around us. This is something absolutely revolutionary as far as the concept of God was concerned. And then he depicted his God through an icon, Ekonkar, pronounced as Ekonkar. And he prescribed a meditation on this icon along with the meaning behind it. You can describe Guru Nanak's icon, Ekonkar, as meaning one virtual reality manifested in numerous ways through the creation. All the creation is a manifestation of Ekonkar. And then imagine Guru Nanak himself described this icon in his own words. If you read Guru Granth, page 296, he writes, Anik bhanti hoi pasraya Nanak Ekonkar. Ekonkar manifests its creation in so many ways. And we perceive and connect with that higher entity through its manifestation in creation and consume its virtues within us to become human beings. You know, Nanak goes further and he selected some of the human virtues to inculcate with a purpose, to lift ourselves to a godlike way of life. As a matter of fact, there's a synthesis of man and God. By the practice of the virtues, Nanak brought about a metamorphosis that transformed humans into God. So the dividing line between a human being and a God is obliterated. If you look at the dictionary meaning of metamorphosis, it's a change in the form or nature of a living entity. Transforms that entity to an entirely distinct entity by natural process. And when it's done right, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, the transformation of a human body into a godlike entity is metamorphosis, and that is what Guru Nanak says when he writes on page 462 of Guru Granth, Balihari Gur Tihari Sadwar, Jin Manas ke Devki, Kiye Karth na Laki War. I may sacrifice to my Guru, the enlightener, 100 times a day, as my Guru makes angels out of human beings, bypassing all delaying tactics and ploys. Guru Nanak goes still further and he says that the heightened image of a metamorphosis, he gives an example of goldsmith who makes a jewel of the ordinary method. Page 1399. Lol, Holy Lal, Nadar Satguru Tetari. That iron is transformed into a gemstone when the Guru bestows the blessing. Well, here is a comment by Krishan Kumar Vash. If Nanak Dev Ji's God is different from other religions, why he termed as Hari, Ekonkar, Gopala, Govinda? Krishan, if you heard me from the beginning, in the very beginning I said that Guru Nanak did not hesitate to use the names. He was not concerned with the names. He was more concerned with the reality. He also uses Allah. And if he had known at that time that God can be used, he would have used God as well. So, use of a Konkar, Gopal, Govinda, Vishnu, Shiv, they are the names. But the reality, he says, is not in the names. Reality has to be divested from the names. So Guru Nanak further says that Ekankar remains to realize when one wishes to resolve doubts. So when you Bharam Chute Te Ekankar, he writes on page 736, you get rid of all impending doubts. What remains is spirituality of Ekankar. So relevant to the human life in its interrelationship and its practices, Guru Nanak further highlights that God dwells in each heart with a twofold purpose. Now everybody says God dwells in the heart, but there's a twofold purpose. First is to learn the divine virtues, and second is to lead the wisdom oriented person towards inculcating divine virtues so that human virtues and the divine virtues combine together and they create the God itself. Man becomes God. Kaya andar ape vase alak na lakhya jai. Quranic writes on page 754. The divine dwells within the body. It's invisible and may not be realized. So Guru Nanak's purpose in stressing the divine was to follow and lead the people towards our life's real goal. That's to achieve the God within. self-realization, self-awareness. And that's what I have always been talking about. The purpose was to emulate God by living a life that actively expresses divine attributes in everyday expressions. So there's no dividing line in living and praying. Every action, every word you say is an approach to God. And then, something beautiful, which no other religion would say. He said that a person of God must be like a God. हर जन ऐसा चाहिए जैसा हर ही होए. He writes on page 1372. So, हर जन ऐसा चाहिए. Every person should be like that he is like that. There are 1430 pages of the sacred scripture that elaborate Guru Nanak's teaching about God. But in the beginning, the first sentence, Ekonkar, Satnam, Kartapurak, Nirbhav, Nirvair, Akal Murat, Ajuni Sebang, Gurprasad. These are the primeval words that describe the attributes of God. So, what does basically mean? The virtue, God is one virtual reality manifested in all creation. So recognize your true eternal identity, become truthful, create your personality, fearless behavior, no enemies, timeless action, and no impact of anthroporism. Engage in that, cultivate the eternal self. And these attributes of God are to be cultivated by man. Ultimately, what comes? The God and the man police. And every man, irrespective of his caste, irrespective of his nationality, has these attributes. The only difference is whether he is able to achieve them, manifest them or not. Capability may be there, it may be latent. So that's how that divinity is sought to be created within human beings and not an outside agency. But as I said in the beginning, pantheism, duality of life finishing and the duality becoming the unity of all nature is the way Nanak would define God. And that's the major difference, that God is not a forbidding thing. One doesn't have to be fearful of God. One has to be God himself. And that is the approach to uplift the being. Thank you.